Welcome to the Trade Up Podcast for another terrific interview led by John Finan. I'm Lisa Brandt, John's co-author of the book Trade Up, where we demonstrate the ways a career in skilled trades can give young people a better start for a life with more opportunity and less debt. Brandi Ferenc took business economics at university and then spent a decade in the hospitality industry before training to become a 313A, a refrigeration and air conditioning systems mechanic. Brandi helped pave the way for women in her industry and absolutely loved the work. She also pushed through discrimination on the job, and that's what she's working to change, starting with company culture. Her company, Fair Trades Toolbox, advises business owners, mentors apprentices, and more. Brandi has been named one of Canada's 100 most powerful women 2 years in a row. She talked to John Finan about her career, whether she'd do it all again, and what it's been like to be one of few women working in HVAC.
If you can't imagine, maybe your wife or your sister or your mother picking up a set of tools and working, if that's your only reference point as far as women in skilled trades go, then, I can't blame you for being a skeptic. But I guess I was a bit of a go-getter just from day one. I showed up early. I was the last one down to break. I was the first one to stand up and go back to work. I didn't bother in the hallway gossip, as I call it on a construction site. Construction is very different than my HVAC world, which was service, right? So we're all on a job site until it ends. It's a lot like a little family. And with that comes all of the drama that goes with that, right? I really think like the owner made comments like, you're way less gossipy than the guys. We never see you standing around not doing anything. I'm very organized and I showed up to work, right? So for me, I was in my mid 30s at this time almost. So it was like, I wasn't hungover. I came to work and I already knew I was going to have to work 10 times harder than anyone else if I was going to get anywhere in this industry. I took it as a challenge, right? I thought, and that's fine if they didn't end up signing me as an apprentice. I already knew there would be something else that would come out of it, right? I felt it was an opportunity and I couldn't pass up that opportunity to take another step forward in my skilled trades career.
Yeah, good for you.
Thanks.
So when I went through my apprenticeship in the late 80s and early 90s, there was a boom-bust cycle. So there was lots of work 1 minute, and the next minute, nobody's working at all. So I get hired at a company out of Strathroy, and another guy gets hired the same day, and we're working on an ambulance center. And at the end of the day, we say goodbye, and the next day he doesn't show up. And I'm asking the journeyman, where's Gary? Say, oh, I got rid of him. He wasn't working very hard. I'm like,
yeah.
Like you say, you showed up to work, you got at it. You weren't just standing around all the time. And I think that that's what every job site needs, regardless of who's on it.
When we talk to apprentices or potential apprentice candidates, as we call them, like when we're doing those initial coaching calls, I tell them showing up on time means you're a half an hour early. If the job starts at 7, you're there at 6:30. This is the expectation. Your coffee's done, your tools are in your hand, you're not scrolling through your socials. When we say like on time, that's kind of always been my benchmark. And if you want to stand out, that's how you're going to stand out. It's like a bear chase, right? You don't have to be the fastest, but you can't be the slowest.
Absolutely. As a 313A, you would be on some big construction sites.
Yeah.
So
mostly
big chillers, big refrigeration.
I lucked out. A lot of people in my industry never work on chillers. I actually was working for a manufacturer for most of my apprenticeship, but it's service mostly. So I didn't do a lot of install because really for my equipment, install is just a startup. Like electricians bring in our power, plumbers and fitters bring in our piping. So for large water-cooled centrifugal chillers, right? We're all working like a big family, right? It takes all of the trades to make it work. The bread and butter for HVAC is service. So planned maintenance is a big deal, as well as going out to do service calls and stuff like that. So I really think, my time spent, it's double-edged. There's a lot of barriers I faced through the years, but I saw some things that I would have never known existed. Like I spent 5 or 6 years in and out of nuclear facilities up in Kincardine Way, data centers of healthcare facilities. You get this backstage pass to the world. And I just think it's very cool. We would do full load testing, like heat load testing on our equipment, and everything has to be running. So whether you're there at an arena for Cirque du Soleil or a hockey game, it's got to be when everything is running, right? So those are the things I really like to bring to everyone's attention when we do talk to young people and you say, it bigger than what you could ever imagine, because I even came from a skilled trades family. And, my dad is an electrician. He was the one telling me, oh, HVAC, you guys just run like 1/4-inch copper. Like he never knew I would be rigging out a 3,500-pound motor off a chiller, and so I think even as tradespeople, sometimes we take for granted the things that are they really set us apart in our career paths, right? The stuff that you get to see, it's all part of the journey.
So you went through your apprenticeship and worked a little bit in the trade, but now you're doing a couple of different things. So maybe share with us, you're doing some teaching, but you're also running your own small company.
Yeah. So I spent about 14-ish years with a large HVAC company. And like I said, mostly service. My life changed. My mental health was suffering a little bit. The hours were long. The on-call schedule is a bit of a grind, especially I had moved branches. So I was then now working out of the GTA area. And, it's not recent. We've been hurting for tradespeople for a while. Less people to draw from means everyone's carrying a bigger load right on their shoulders with the hours. And it was time for a change for me. So I kind of thought to myself, what else do I want to do? I wasn't ready to get off the tools yet. So I decided I saw an in-house position. So one of the next, phases in a tradesperson's life is you can decide to go in-house, which is regular hours, 8 to 4. I got to eat lunch inside, not in my truck. I got breaks, which I hadn't had in a decade. And I didn't have an on-call schedule anymore. So, I didn't have to, jump out of bed at 3 a.m. or be working for 2 or 3 days with almost no sleep. Financially, I took a pay cut, but my mental health really, it was a great time for me. I felt so much better, almost like 6 months into my new position. I was working with a really great team. So in-house, we had all the trades with us. So plumbers, electricians, millwright, you name it. And of course, HVAC. And that was great for me. Unfortunately, though, I was the first female to join the facilities maintenance team at this hospital only a few years back. Did run into some issues again, which I'd run into these issues before. But at this point now, I'm like, well, now I'm rolling up onto 20 years working on the tools. And I decided to step back and take a little bit of a break. And luckily, I could afford to do that years ago, probably around 2015 was the first time I started teaching. So I accepted, like a lot of people do, a part-time teaching position. I've taught for, a few different colleges over the years. The on-call schedule was a bit too much though. So I had to let it go. I couldn't teach with the on-call. When I went to the in-house job, what was so great is they actually reached out to me, which was really cool. My coordinator at Georgian was like, hey, Brandi, can you come back? I saw your LinkedIn profile changed. And I was like, absolutely. Yeah. So it's amazing when you make a decision for your life that's going to affect yourself in a positive way, not just for financial gain. This other opportunity that came up that more than made up for the loss I took. And also around that same time that I went to the hospital, a nonprofit was formed called Support Ontario Youth. And they actually needed a mentor in my trade. So in order to get the funding for each trade, we mentor like electricians, plumbers, millwrights. We do a lot in the motive sector, but they need to have a licensed journey person on staff. So I became their technical mentor for the 313A. And as their first female journey person, I also mentor their female apprentices in any trade to help them with that unique journey. So those were the two things that came out of that move to go in-house, which for me was super rewarding, just to kind of see how many more opportunities there were out there for us as journey people that I never really imagined going back 20 years ago when I got into the trades. And then when I did have those barriers hit, as I spoke of earlier, I decided to take a step back. And I've just recently left my full-time position at the hospital and I started Fair Trades Toolbox. So I kind of feel like we're in this perfect storm. We've got this skilled trades labor shortage. We really need to look to that other 50% of the population to fill those gaps. But on the whole, although most people will say to you, it's not like that anymore, I'm living proof that it is like that still. There are still barriers for women, but I think it revolves around a lack of education. So Fair Trades has been birthed out of that. And I want to work with employers now and organizational leaders to help educate, and work to onboard women properly into their male-dominated teams. And I'm hoping through education that we can really bring that to the skilled trades sector where we don't have that right now. I speak to people in police services, fire departments, and although it's not perfect, they've made really great strides on integrating their teams that used to be male dominated, but we're not quite there yet, and the numbers are proof of that. The numbers aren't going up. So although there's a lot of visibility and there's all these events, there's all these women in skilled trades events, we're advertising, I'm out talking to high school women. And I think it's all great, but what happens when they hit the field, right? We don't have a bridge for that. We don't have a transition for employers to seamlessly make that transition to also benefit their male technicians in the field as well, right? It's a culture shock for everyone. It's just more bringing awareness, but as well, I have now a program I've put together to come in and work with people that are a little bit more forward-thinking employers that want to get out ahead and fill those holes with women.
That's excellent. And I've always felt that whether it's men or women looking to get into any vocation or anything in general, they need to see somebody down the road that says, I want to be like that person. And I think for young women, probably is going to be a woman, although it doesn't have to be.
No.
When I did my apprenticeship, I worked for many journeymen. And I always talk about these two characters that I work with. One fellow was like the absolute best journey person I'd ever worked with in terms of the technical side. He could get anything done. But you know what? In 2 years, I worked with this guy. Work was perfect, but he wore the same pair of Converse high-top running shoes that were never tied up. He may have worn the same pair of pants every day. And if I had to build a building, I would absolutely get this guy to do it. But you wouldn't put him into a building where he had to be doing service work and talking to people.
Yeah.
And then conversely, there was another fellow at the same company, polished. I mean, brought his lunch. I'm still using the same lunch box that he suggested I buy. He said it has to be square so you can sit on it. We never ate out. We always saved our money, and we talked about investing. He always wore a collared shirt every day, which most days I do as well. And he wore cologne. Kind of odd even in any environment, but this is how he rolled. And whenever I think about how I want to be perceived in the trade, I think of the fellow with the collared shirt and the cologne, and because that's it. So I think you're setting that example for what you're doing for young people, and particularly for young women that are looking to get into the trade. So that's wonderful that you're doing.
I love that about the guy there because, one of the things I really feel that we're missing is, I'm not saying we have to wear I like cologne and a collar. But what I think we're missing is that I worked for a large company with stellar HR policies. But once we hit the field, none of those policies mattered anymore. And what I think is that blue collar is the new white collar. And so I feel like it's just bringing that awareness and education and that professional development. Like, we need to treat each other as professionals. Our licenses are the equivalent of getting a master's degree. I feel like you don't have to like me at the end of the day, but when we're working alongside each other, we should be able to treat each other with a professional respect. And I really think that story that you just told about that gentleman, that we need more of that, So.
Yeah, that's right. And I think when we have the plumbing apprentice is third term, she wanted to get into plumbing right out of high school. I think she might have been an OYAP student.
Yes. Yeah.
And then we have another woman that's she's been in the trade with us for about a year. She's an electrical apprentice. Second career, she was in landscaping, which honestly, if you've done any kind of work, landscaping is probably the hardest job there is. She was in that for a number of years. It's wonderful to have them. And I think, I don't know if they see mentors ahead of them that were female. So you're doing a lot of work with employers. So this I'm really interested in because as an employer of tradespeople, and on the one hand, we say it's very difficult to get tradespeople, but the reality is it's not difficult to get people that are interested in getting into the trades that have no skills. So we want to get the best quality candidates. And I was reading a statistic, and I think it might have been HRAI, so the heating refrigeration side of things, it sent out a stat that 55% of male apprentices actually complete it. Now, it wasn't trade specific. Trades include everything from hairdressing to plumbing. So yeah. I'm not sure what the criteria was. But for women, it was lower than that. It was in the mid 30s. And that is a real challenge is if you start this process, you want to make sure you finish.
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing is making sure you're matching it up.
Yeah. And that stat is definitely for all apprentices. And like you said, that includes like hairdressing and estheticians. So currently 2.4% of all construction trade apprentices are female. So that's our little circle that we run in. Of those 2.4%, only 0.7% of them are expected to complete their apprenticeship. And of those zero point 0.7, many of those women will take their license and immediately leave the field to use that license to secure a more female-friendly career path, whether that might be in sales or estimating or working at a wholesaler. Hard to say exactly, as the numbers are so small for us already. It's low. And, the thing that I really work towards, although I come from the standpoint of a female, obviously I advocate for women, but as a mentor, I mentor young male apprentices that are, they're young, they're 19 in their early 20s. They also want to leave the trade because of how they're being treated on job sites. So I know that, this isn't something, it was funny, after my presentation at the CMPX, I had a couple guys come to me and they're like, the stuff that you talked about, like that would work for anyone, not just women. And I'm like, you're right. Yep. If we approach it from a human standpoint, you know what? It's going to make it better for everyone. And those young male apprentices, they're of that same mindset, like the workforce has evolved and people are not motivated the same way. I had a fire lit under me and I wasn't going to give up, bar of being seriously injured, which I was injured a couple times, but not enough to keep me down. I wasn't going to quit for anything. But, these days, the next generation, they're not motivated by people, using profanities and swearing at them. They're not motivated by people throwing tools at them. And there's a better way. And, I hear this all the time. I hear companies say, well, I don't want to take on a first or a second year apprentice because I'm going to train them and then they're going to leave. And I think to myself, well, wait a second. Why are they leaving though? Right? What is happening? Like that's the disconnect. The problem isn't that they leave. So you don't want to hire a first or a second year. Everyone calls up and they're like, I want a third or fourth year apprentice. But the problem is that middle part where no one talks about, well, why are they leaving your company? And I think with some really like easy tools to implement, and depending on the type of company it is, it's funny how small changes can make a big difference. I speak to a lot of journey persons, especially right now. There's a lot of financial incentive for people to jump companies, right? Oh, they're getting a signing bonus if they leave their company and go next door, right?
Right.
I know my LinkedIn, it blows up all day. Like I can go back on the tools anywhere I want tomorrow. But there's a lot of people that are motivated by things that don't have a monetary value attached to it. And I think employers are missing out on that. And that all comes with employee satisfaction, retention goes up, and at the end of the day, everybody makes more money. Like you as a business owner, you make more money. That's kind of my approach to the whole thing. Nobody loses on this, right? So it's very educational, solutions based. I'm not coming at anyone with problems. I'm here to talk about the solutions.
Yeah, that's a good point. And when I think about why somebody might say, I don't want to train somebody because they're going to leave, knowing full well that there's probably a large percentage that will leave at a certain point because you got them into the trade. They've got a little bit of experience. Probably you've signed them up. That gives them a gateway to a whole world that wasn't available before. And the reason that they're leaving is because as the business owner, most of us aren't willing to make the changes they need to for their staff to want to stay.
Yeah.
It's always easy to blame the other person. Like, oh gosh, I can't find good people. Well, probably not. It's probably more you than it is them.
Yeah. I mean,
we all have horror stories of employers and employees, but it's probably the employer's issue.
Exactly. And now we're just in this like perfect storm where back in my day, I had to feel fortunate just to have a job. So I was very hesitant to try to, when things weren't working out for me very well, I had to stick it out. And I just we used to say like, just ride the wave, right? And hopefully it will change for the better. But now we've got a labor shortage. So if you're not happy, there's somewhere else you can go. That's where the mindset has to shift in our industry. And then I think when we look ahead, over the next decade, I think, where do you want your company to go over the next 5 or 10 years? Because you have to think about those things today. And it's not magically just going to happen. You've got to put in a little bit of work. And you know what? Change is hard, but usually it's only those first couple steps.
No, you're absolutely right.
And things will start to snowball in a positive way. So, yeah.
So you mentioned something we want to spend a little bit of time on the podcast educating people about, paths through the trades.
Yeah.
And we're not going to dig too much into how apprenticeships work. It's a rabbit hole that I tell people you really need to talk to somebody at the ministry to understand every single nuance of it. You can't send your 18-year-old to a 2-year pre-apprenticeship program at your local college and they're set. They're not.
No.
What's said is that you've spent 10 grand a year sending them to college. They're really no further off.
That's right.
Better off. But you mentioned something about I can go anywhere. So your LinkedIn is blowing up. And I know on the refrigeration side, we're in a climate where refrigeration is a little less important than it is in other parts of the world. Have you ever considered going to some of the countries that are looking for a Canadian to come in? I think of Saudi Arabia as a place where I've heard mechanics will go and make an awful lot of money for 2-3 years and come back and they're essentially set. Have you considered that?
Yeah, and I definitely would not consider going to anywhere like that. As a female too, it adds a level of danger that I would not want to get into. I had some bad experiences. I did Europe a while back in my early 20s, and I had very close to me not being here sitting talking to you when I was in Turkey. So I'm very hesitant to think of taking my ticket abroad that way. However, prior to getting married, I did, North America, we have a lot of mechanics that our apprenticeship program and our way here is so amazing. Now, everyone obviously doesn't graduate at the top of their class. So you could be someone that's, maybe not even the best of the best, and you can end up with a fantastic job over the border. So I guess kind of like we have an exodus of nurses that are going over the States. I know so many mechanics that are going there as well. I will say this though, I know a lot of people that have traveled a good part of, the world and definitely our country with their license, taking their family with them. And they have just been so successful with that. And I love going on vacation, although I haven't decided I'm going to kind of go and work anywhere abroad with my license. I do love understanding and learning about the different types of systems and the needs that they have in other countries and the equipment that they can use that maybe we can't use here, which is really, It's kind of one of those things, with the Red Seal, we both mentioned that before, you can take that ticket anywhere in Canada. But as a Canadian journey person, you're actually really high. The standards are high, like you're valued. And I guess on the other side of it, I get a lot of messages on LinkedIn of people that are in other countries, even over in the Arab nations there, and they want to come here and work. So it's interesting how we're trying to find ways to fast track so they don't have to redo their whole apprenticeship. So if you take an HVAC mechanic from another country, maybe somewhere in Asia, and they're coming over here, we're trying to find ways to work with them so that they can have some type of equivalency test so that they're licensed to work here sooner as another means to help fill those skilled trades labor shortages.
We just had an engineer from Philippines. We brought this woman in to do some estimating, and her engineering certificate wasn't recognized in Ontario, but the province started some equivalency education, but certainly isn't 4 or 5 years of university for her to do it. But my very first electrical apprentice was an electrician from Bosnia. So he was a refugee, he came here with his family, and he had written his CFQ, I believe, 5 times. And had not passed. And his highest mark, now probably in refrigeration, it was the same, it's multiple choice, was only slightly better than just randomly guessing. And so I said to this fellow, because he did not want to do an apprenticeship, I said, you really have to. I said, technically you're not there. Like, you may have been an electrician in your country, but it doesn't translate. And the language barrier it took a while. Like, English wasn't his first language. He was just learning English, got his driver's license while he worked with me, got his first apartment, that sort of stuff. So it was really a challenge.
I encourage, when we work on resumes and stuff, I encourage people, it's terrible of how if they have a second language, they don't want to put that on their resume. And I think it's a plus. I know there's a lot of companies now that work within their own communities. They understand the culture, they know the customs, they know what days, different holidays, different times you wouldn't maybe enter someone's home or when you're not working on those days. And I think that's such a benefit. I mean, we live in this multicultural melding pot, especially in Southwestern Ontario, and it's only a plus. So, my students, I encourage them, you speak a second language, put that on your resume. And also to that point, like, you might have clientele that will help with certain customers, right? So, but yeah, there definitely has to be still a grasp of the English language. And again, like you said there about your one friend that there's programs available for people to help get them there faster.
Let me ask you one last question
Sure.
before we sort of pause. Thinking back on your journey, would you have gone to university again, or would you say no? I'm going to get into the trades right away.
No, I think I definitely, looking back, I mean, my parents, they shake their head now. My dad wasn't supportive of me getting into the trades. I think as a father, nobody would want their daughter to endure some of the things that I have, and I see that now. I didn't in the beginning. Yeah. But I look back and they think the same thing. They think, where would I be today? I'm 51 years old. And, they think, where would I be if I got into the trades at even 20 instead of 30? Where would I be if I had an extra 20 years in this industry? I never could imagine. I mean, the 2 awards I won, the top 100, Canada's Most Powerful Woman in the skilled trades category, I never imagined I'd go to a gala and sit with, CEOs and these incredible female doctors that, go to third world countries and save lives and things like that. I would just have never imagined this life for myself. And looking back, even getting into the trades, I just wanted a good job where I wouldn't be replaced by technology. I've worked through a recession and a pandemic. And, that's all I wanted for myself was financial independence. And I wanted a career that it didn't matter if the factory closed down. I would always have a job, which I have. And all of these other opportunities came out of it. So, when I talk to young people and parents are hesitant, they think it's going to be backbreaking work until you die. And I say to them, teaching, mentoring, being an entrepreneur, opening your own company up, even if it is still running your own skilled trades company. Mine's a little bit different, but the sky's the limit these days. And I just think it's fantastic. And then, you speak to other people there, like I said, sales, estimating, if you're with bigger companies, project management, and to your point about traveling, the company I worked with before was a global company. And had I wanted to work for them and go to the Bahamas and live there, I could have done that. It was my choice not to. But I think really, where would you rather be? And absolutely, to your point there, if I could do it all over again, I would have just started a lot sooner.
I'm with you on that. Not often do people say that. I spent the last weekend in Ottawa, Mount Tremblant, with some university friends, and they all graduated, did extremely well. But I did okay too.
Yeah, of course you did.
Yeah. So, and I think it's really the work ethic that I learned in the trades that kind of promoted me to do that. So thanks so much for spending some time with us today and sharing your story and some advice, and good luck on all of the mentoring you're doing, as well as the teaching contractors how to do things.
Thanks for listening to the Trade Up Podcast. You can find out more about Brandi Ferenc and her work at fairtradestoolbox.com. If you have feedback about the podcast or want to suggest a future guest, email John Finan at john@tradeupbook.ca. I'm Lisa Brandt. Ciao.